So there are foodborne diseases in poultry, eggs and meat that can make you sick. And chickens especially have gotten a bad rap over the years for Salmonella especially, and things like Campylobacter and E. coli. So the poultry industry has done a lot to try and reduce these foodborne pathogens, but let me tell you, any chicken you pick up probably has a lot of bacteria. Just from the way they're raised on the floor, you know, all broilers are raised on the floor. There's a lot of fecal material around. In that fecal material, there's E. coli, there's Salmonella, there's everything. So just assume, if you go to the store and buy some chicken, there's a lot of bacteria on that chicken. Just don't throw water on it and put it in your oven. Wash the chicken really well. You know how I wash my chicken? I put salt on it. Take off the skin, put salt on it 3 times, wash it with salt, especially if you have kosher salt. And the last wash, I put vinegar in the last wash. To me, that destroys all the bacteria, even before I start cooking it. And then the next thing, you have to cook. Cook your eggs well, cook your chicken well. I cringe when I see people eating eggs with water, with the yolks just streaming out. They're very brave. I know it tastes good, but you can get salmonella from that. So, what are zoonosis? Nowadays, we hear talk about all these zoonotic diseases. These are infectious diseases that go directly from animals to humans. And 61% of all human pathogens come from animals. They're zoonotic. And this is according to the World Health Organization. Among these are avian diseases that are of viral, fungal, bacterial, and parasitic origin. So, of all the emerging diseases that we've seen in the world in the past maybe 10 years, 75% of them are coming from animals, from Ebola to all these horrible diseases. So we live with animals, but we can share their diseases also. And sometimes you see reports, Consumer Reports did one, is your chicken safe to eat? It was a very extensive look at what's behind chicken meat. So the alarming truth behind the latest outbreaks, there was an outbreak of Salmonella at a big farm called Foster Farms. And how can you protect yourself? To me, the protection is the cooking. All these bacteria die, viruses die when they're exposed to heat. So just cook it and cook it well. Don't cook your chickens half and half. You can do that with beef and get away with it. But don't do that with chickens because they are in too much close contact with bacteria. Much more. I mean, you can slaughter a cow and get a steak from it that has never been exposed to anything. It's right in there, it's sterile. But with chickens, they're just too close to the ground, and even though they clean them really well at the processing plant, you just never know. Just cook them well. So poultry, eggs, meat have been implicated in many outbreaks that involve Salmonella, Listeria, or Campylobacter. Those are the 3 most common foodborne diseases we see in poultry. But these organisms are normal inhabitants of the digestive tract of the chickens. They're always spewing out Listeria, Campylobacter, and Salmonella. And Salmonella we can also get with vertical transmission into the egg. And that is what we want to stop. At least that we can do it. If we don't get it into the egg, then at least when you want your gooey yolk, you'll be safe. So we do a lot of testing for Salmonella. In the old days, it used to be a voluntary program in many states, and now it's compulsory. The Food and Drug Administration has it that if you own 3,000 chickens and above, you need to test them for Salmonella. and you test the environment. You're testing the feces, and you send it to your local lab, your state lab, and they can tell if it's positive. Those eggs are not going to be allowed into the supermarkets. They send it to the breakers, and those eggs are used as liquid eggs, powdered eggs, because they are pasteurized under high heat to kill all the salmonella. But you can also have eggshell contamination with salmonella, and we just talked about that. In Europe, they leave the eggs, they don't wash them, so they still have that protective cuticle, and even though you might see fecal matter on the egg, it's still okay to leave them outside and not keep them refrigerated. But we wash our eggs, we clean them, and we never used to test as much as the Europeans for salmonella, so we have to keep eggs in the cooler. And so, you know, just by eggshell contamination, not just for humans, but even chicks can be infected when that salmonella gets in through those pores of the egg. Two kinds of salmonella. You know, the most common ones that we deal with, the Salmonella enteritis that causes food poisoning. When you leave your mayonnaise out during the summer when you're having a picnic, it's raw eggs, and those eggs have salmonella. You can make many people sick. Salmonella Heidelberg is becoming very important, and Salmonella typhimurium also can cause food poisoning. So those are the three common salmonellas that we deal with. And then you have one called Campylobacter, another type of bacteria that we find a lot in meat, but you have to cook it because Campylobacter is a normal inhabitant of the digestive tract. E. coli, everyone knows about E. coli. We see it not just in chickens, but in cattle, in beef. Actually, beef is contaminated with feces. We have Clostridium perfringens. Clostridium is a bacteria that produces toxins. And so it will produce toxins type A and type C. And this is what causes botulism. Clostridium. Clostridium botulinum is another type of Clostridium that we see. It can cause botulism in chickens. It can cause it in ducks. But the other type of Clostridium perfringens, we can find it also in chickens, and it can cause toxicosis in humans. Listeria. Listeria is found a lot in sheep. So if you have chickens that are roaming around your sheep and picking up sheep feces, it's possible that they can get listeria in the meat. It contaminates the meat. And then there's this other bacteria. But these are the most important: Salmonella, Campylobacter, and Listeria. Beautiful organism. It's what we call a gram-negative bacillus. And they are all from this one species called Salmonella enterica. And the paratyphoid salmonella are the ones that we're most concerned about. Those are the S. enteritis, S. typhimurium, and S. heidelberg. So in humans, we have salmonella illness when people eat contaminated food that's undercooked, especially chicken or eggs. I talked about mayonnaise, egg salads, anything that you're making with eggs, you have to be very careful about contamination. But it affects the human GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract, and causes diarrhea. And sometimes the bacteria grow so much in the blood that it goes to your joints, it affects your bones, your urinary tract, especially your kidneys. It can shut down your kidneys, especially very young children and older people that have very immature immune systems. The young children immune systems are immature, and older people's immune systems are not as good as the younger person's immune system. So, and also people that have illnesses such as HIV/AIDS that have a very destroyed immune system, they can die very easily from these infections. So it causes abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, fever, very severe diarrhea. It's a very, very bad illness. So I'm just showing you some outbreaks that we've had in the US. In 2010, there was a multi-state illness linked 2 farms, egg farms in Iowa, and it was widely publicized. And that is why the FDA came in and said everyone's going to test from now on. Because they found out those farms were really dirty. There was a lot of rodents, rats carry salmonella. They carry salmonella in their feces. And we know that rats always come to where poultry are because of the feed. So we have this egg rule that covers people that have more than 3,000 layers. If you have less than 3,000, the FDA is not going to come and knock on your door, but it's always good to keep that in mind, that you have to make sure that your birds don't have salmonella. So there's a lot of backyard poultry that owners that call me, and we do test the salmonella for them. We tell them to send in like environmental samples. And this company, the company that was owned, the people that own the company, these 2 Iowa farms, they were fined $6.8 million. Actually, the owner owned some farms in Maine. That was where the base of this company was. So they've sold those farms now. So in Arkansas in 2012, there was an outbreak of salmonella in a prison. Can you imagine that? You are in prison and then you have salmonella? That's really bad. That's double punishment. And so they had these inmates infected with Salmonella Heidelberg, and they were traced to foods made with eggs produced on the prison grounds. They had their own chickens. So they were producing their own eggs, and then they were sharing with another prison those eggs, but they had contamination of salmonella. So the eggs were not sanitized, and food handling procedures were really poor in that prison. So a lot of people got sick. And then we had the outbreak in California. Foster Farms is a broiler company. They had Salmonella Heidelberg that affected 700 people in multiple western states. And they had to recall 1 million pounds of meat from this company. So the company went through a lot of battering in the media. So that's why companies are very conscious about keeping meat safe. Then we have the mail order hatcheries. You probably get your chicks sometimes through the mail. You order them through the post office, and they drop them off at your house, or I think you go pick them up from the post office. But you have all these day-old chicks and pullets, and they can carry salmonella. So going through the post office, you can see boxes ready for shipping. They go to feed stores, sometimes you go to the Agway Tractor Supply to pick them up. And we see a lot of salmonella outbreaks in baby poultry, 33 outbreaks since the 1990s, associated with sale of chicks around this time of year in the spring for Easter. Little kids get sick. And then nowadays you see people putting dye in the eggs so that the chicks will look bright and nice, and that attracts little kids. There has been a poultry in Ohio that has been found guilty for the past 2 years of producing chicks that are salmonella, and kids have gotten sick from that. This is what happens. They go around and they touch this, and you know little kids, they don't know to go wash their hands after they touch the chick. The next minute, they're putting their hands in their mouth. And even tiny flecks of fecal material can have thousands of salmonella. So there were 40% of children affected in this Ohio hatchery outbreak. Multiple states were involved, and we had all these different kinds of salmonella that were causing the problem. So this is just a graphic from CDC that shows since the 1990s how many outbreaks of salmonella we've had, how many deaths, about 5 deaths, 221 hospitalizations, and 1,581 illnesses. Salmonella outbreaks. Then we have all these other zoonotic bacteria that I've talked about that we can get in poultry. And they all cause similar symptoms as the salmonella, acute gastroenteritis. But then with Campylobacter, you can also have what we call reactive arthritis and Guillain-Barré syndrome, septic abortion in humans, and death. So this can be very serious, and that's why in the processing plants they do a lot of testing. There's USDA people there to make sure that these bacteria are not on the food that you're going to be buying in your supermarket. There's a antibiotic fluoroquinolone or Baytril that was banned for use in poultry because it was becoming resistant to Campylobacter. Even though I get a lot of people that send me their chickens that said, oh, my vet treated it with Baytril. The FDA has banned Baytril in every food animal. Even if you think your chicken is a pet chicken and you're never going to eat it, you cannot use Baytril because people were developing resistance to the use of Baytril, and fluoroquinolone is used a lot in human medicine. So we don't want it used in animals that we're eating in case we have residues, and then these Campylobacter strains are going to, and E. coli strains are going to be resistant to it. So if I eat a lot of chicken that has Campylobacter and E. coli strains that are resistant, or it has fluoroquinolone, I go into the hospital and I get sick, I cannot be cured by the fluoroquinolone because I already have in my system these resistant strains that this fluoroquinolone cannot cure. So that's why it was banned. It was actually like a miracle drug. I remember poultry owners, especially turkey owners, were very happy when we were using Baytril because it will clear any bacterial infection, but we can't use it anymore. Erysipelothrax that causes erysipelas is the same thing that causes erysipelas in pigs. It can cause disease in turkeys. In the old days, people used to get like these skin diseases, turkey workers, and they didn't know what it was, and then later they found out it was because the turkeys had erysipelas. So when the turkeys have erysipelas, when they're taken to the processing plant, people have to be very careful. And they have certain things they can do to prevent the illness. So in birds, it just causes skin discoloration, decreased egg production, diarrhea, and then in tom turkeys, this is what we see. They have like necrotic snoods, and then you have just red patches all over. It's mostly a turkey disease. And in humans, it causes a skin disease. It used to be called like a butcher's type of disease because the butchers were not aware that these turkeys were infected, and then they will go home and then they will have all this skin disease. So it's a localized skin disease. It can be worse. It can be septicemic. It can go in the blood, and it can cause endocarditis. It can cause heart disease. Now, chlamydia is also another big turkey disease. We don't see it as often anymore, but when turkeys have chlamydia, the feces can aerosolize, and when people breathe that in, they can also get a pneumonia, a chlamydia pneumonia. Thank God we don't see it as much anymore. But then when you open the birds that have it, there's just this really bad fibrinous, you have all these like pus-looking things on the liver, on the heart. It's a very, very bad disease. It's actually quite more common in pet birds. So if you have a parrot, pet birds, they can get chlamydia and you can get it from them. So when your pet birds are sick, run to the vet. Mycobacterium avium, that's TB. That's chicken TB. Chickens can get TB, just like humans. But Mycobacterium avium is specific to chickens. The only time it affects humans is when they have immune deficient conditions like AIDS. So there are a lot of people that had, in the old days, that had HIV AIDS that died from Mycobacterium avium. That's not the normal one that humans get. This is the one that chickens get, but it can affect humans who have a defect in their immune conditions. Now, avian influenza. In 2003, everyone was scared that we're all going to be eliminated by this pandemic influenza virus. It was the H5N1 virus, and there's all the media, how to survive the bird flu. People wrote books, the monster at our door, and very, very funny things, coming from the media about this virus. Highly pathogenic avian influenza, H5N1, has killed 50% of the people that have been infected. In 2003, there were 846 cases and half of them died. So the fatality rate is very high, and we saw this mostly in Asia, in Egypt. Indonesia was like the top country, and then there was Egypt and Vietnam, and it hasn't stopped. It's still out there. It's endemic in many countries, and then there's a new one called H5N1 that's killing people in China. And usually people will report fever and a cough, and later you have difficulty breathing, pneumonia, and death. So it's a bilateral pneumonia, and then people have this cardiac failure, multi-organ failure because of the septicemia. So it's a very serious disease in humans. We saw it a lot in people that were working in live bird markets that are butchering the chickens. It's not a disease that you get just by looking at a chicken. You have to have very intimate contact. Kiss the chicken, get the blood with the virus on your hands, and somehow get it into your mucous membranes. Get it into your eyes, in the mucous membranes. The virus will go into your respiratory tract from there. But you have to be very close contact. I was out working on avian influenza for the UN in many countries, in Sudan, in many countries in Africa. And I used to go to farms where they had avian influenza outbreaks. I mean, I was wearing protective clothing, but there were a lot of people on the farm that did not have protective clothing, and nothing happened to them. Africans are very resilient to disease, I can tell you that. We see so many diseases, we have so many antibodies that things like this don't kill us. So, but it was a disease that killed a lot of people in Egypt, in Indonesia, and in other places. So, but you have to be in close contact, and that's why I believe, because I saw it myself, these people were not in very intimate contact with the birds. They were there helping to pick up the dead birds to go and bury them. They just had like a cloth around their nose. And then later they were tested, they did not even have antibodies. So the virus never got into their system. But if people that butcher chickens, you have blood splashing all over the place, you can get the virus. So in humans, H5N1 right now in China has been killing a lot of humans. But it's in the chickens. They're finding it in the live bird markets. So it's very similar to the H5N1, very severe respiratory disease. But so far, all these avian influences that's been going into humans have not been found to jump from human to human. It's coming directly from the chicken to the human, but not going from human to human, and that's good. But influenza viruses are very strange viruses. They change themselves. And that is why everyone is so concerned. Because these are viruses that can change their genetic material. They might see a pig, get into a pig, and they will take the pig influenza, mix it with the avian influenza, mix it with the human influenza. And then we have this huge pandemic. So that is what all these agencies, the WHO, the CDC, they're on the track of these viruses. They're always studying these viruses, looking at the genetic material to make sure that these viruses have not changed to go from human to human.